listen, I talk forever. I talk about the socks and cells, ooh, and Pats forever. The Pats are champs, the Sox are too, ooh, that lasts forever. Talking sports.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Nashua sports fans, and welcome to Crosby Sports Talk here on WSMN 1590. We are coming to you live from the Turret here in downtown Nashua, New Hampshire at the Bardis Russell Broadcast Studios on Main Street, and we are talking sports with you for the next 55 minutes or so. If you would like to hop on the line, the number is 603-816-1590. We are obviously talking about the Bruins last evening. We are going to be talking a little golf, a little basketball, really a smorgasbord of sports topics this morning. But before we do that, I want to welcome in a special guest. I've got a little bit of an introduction for him here that I threw together. He is the president of the Boston Boxing Promotions, and let me just give him his little introduction here before we get going.
Get up! Don't let it down like this guy hard! Come on! Come on! He's no machine. I get the NFL! Get up, you son of a bitch! Make it look.
Michigan, most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lynx is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody as ruthless. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah. Are you saying that?
All right, with that, let's welcome in the president of Boston Boxing Promotions to talk about the event coming up at the Castleton Banquet and Conference Center in Windham, New Hampshire on May 31st. He is Peter Czymbor. Peter, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jayson. Hello.
Hello, how are we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on WSMN this morning. And before we talk any boxing in the event May 31st at the Castleton in Windham, I just must commend you not only on the introductory piece you had for me with all the boxing clips, but the intro of your program, which I believe is you singing over the Uncle Jesse version of the Beach Boys Forever,
yes,
while
sir.
changing the words to fit sports, is absolutely fantastic and has got my Sunday morning going like no Sunday morning I've had since football season. How's that?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had a guest on yesterday, and it was the first time he heard that as well. We try to have a little fun here on WSMN, but I always want to give a John Stamos tribute when I can get one in there. But yeah, we're gonna
don't we all?
Right, exactly. But yeah, certainly want to talk about this event. We've got a big event coming up on the 31st at the Castleton Banquet and Conference Center in Windham, New Hampshire. People want more information, they can go to boxingnh.com. This is the fifth pro boxing show they've put on in Windham, New Hampshire in a year and a half. So New Hampshire is suddenly a burgeoning boxing, pro boxing scene, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. It's really kind of caught us by surprise, and it's caught us, thankfully, by surprise. When we first promoted a boxing event in Windham in January of 2018, we didn't know how long this market would be able to sustain us having shows. But a year and a half in, this is our fifth show coming up. We have at least one more show scheduled, maybe two scheduled for the state of New Hampshire before the calendar year 2019 ends. Just New Hampshire's become a hotbed of combat sports. This happens from time to time when surrounding states get a little too picky with their regulatory situations. And New Hampshire is the live free or die state, and 5 shows in a year and a half. We're loving the audience that we have at the Castleton in Windham. The fighters are enjoying it, and we're putting on just good show after good show. It's fantastic, and we're excited to be coming back May 31st to the Castleton.
Excellent. Should be a great event. We have some of the keynote fights here. We've got Ryan, and I can let you pronounce these names a little bit here, but Ryan DiBartolomeo.
So Ryan DiBartolomeo is fighting a guy named Lamar Kelly. Now, something that you and his opponent, Lamar Kelly, may have in common is that Lamar Kelly has referred to him as Ryan, the guy with the 3 last names.
Okay, sure.
But Ryan DiBartolomeo is a former 4-year hockey starter at Southern New Hampshire University, including being a captain his senior year, and transitioned into being a mixed martial arts fighter, and then made his pro debut for us at the Castleton in Windham in January, where he fought a 2-0 fighter named Wilner Mendez. And quite honestly, Wilner Mendez was heavily favored to win that fight. Ryan DiBartolomeo gave him hell. Many people thought he deserved the victory that night. Ultimately, it was a close fight that was ruled a draw. And now DiBartolomeo is back to take on Lamar Kelly on May 31st, who is a fighter from Maine, who most of his amateur fights actually took place in Somersworth, New Hampshire, but it'll be the pro debut for Lamar Kelly, and it'll be the second fight for Ryan DiBartolomeo. And I always find it interesting when hockey players ultimately transition to boxing, not ultimately, but, the few that do transition to boxing, because you know as well as I do that, interestingly enough, fighting is a part of the sport of hockey, even though it's really not within the rule sets of that sport. So I always find it interesting when guys from that sport transition into boxing. And Ryan put up a great fight in January against Wilner Mendez. I'm expecting a great fight between him and Lamar Kelly on the 31st in Windham.
Certainly. Yeah, it seems like they're trying to wean some of the fighting out of hockey. Maybe that's why Ryan made the transition, but that's awesome to have a local kid from SNHU, and I wish both of them well. Obviously, Lamar Kelly from Maine, not too far away. He said he's had a lot of local fights in New Hampshire, so that should be a great bout. We also have Chelmsford's own Brandon Higgins, who's making his pro debut versus Philadelphia's Demetrius Williams, right?
Yeah, Brandon Higgins, who has been a fan favorite at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium at the Golden Gloves for the last few years, making what he would refer to as his long-awaited professional debut as he takes on Philadelphia's Demetrius Williams. I saw Brandon Higgins in the gym this week for the first time, and the guy is just absolutely a workhorse and a cardio machine. He barely broke a sweat while jump roping at a very steady pace for 15 minutes in shadow boxing and hitting the pads and hitting the mitts. And Demetrius Williams from Philadelphia is a personal trainer who I don't think leaves the gym 24/7. So this is one of those fights that's going to be a war of attrition and a war of 2 skilled fighters, well matched at the 4-round level, and I can't wait.
Right. Philadelphia, little known fact, the home of Rocky Balboa.
I don't think that's a little known fact. I think that's a well-known fact. And outside of Rocky Balboa, there's been some great fighters to come out of Philadelphia off the silver screen, I mean. Joe Frazier, Bernard Hopkins, Meldrick Taylor. It's the fighting city of Philadelphia for a reason, aside from being the city of brotherly love.
Certainly. We also have Haverhill's Harry Giglito. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Taking on
Gigliotti, my friend. Harry
Gigliotti.
It's a fun. Some of these guys on the show have such fun last names to say. Gigliotti. DiBartolomeo. I mean, I enjoy saying them once I figure out how to say them.
I'm going to be saying Gigliotti all day, I think, just so I can get that right next time around.
That's great. I'm going to be singing your theme song all day.
I hope so. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And he's going to be taking on Fall River's Chris Jacobs.
Yeah, Harry Gigliotti versus Chris Jacobs. This is one of the most anticipated fights on the show, May 31st. Harry Gigliotti from nearby Haverhill, Mass. made his pro debut on the show in January in Windham, and he was originally supposed to fight a guy from New York named Samuel Forjo. And Samuel Forjo actually withdrew from the fight, citing really no legitimate reason other than he didn't want to do it a week or 2 out before the show. Didn't really consider any contractual obligations into it. We found a replacement opponent, but we found a guy who's a wonderful human being, but a guy that was not training and preparing for a fight. And quite honestly, Harry, who took his pro debut incredibly seriously, had a very easy pro debut where he stopped his opponent 43 seconds into the fight. Now, against Chris Jacobs, he's fighting a guy that has been preparing for this fight for the last 3 months, who is an absolute beast of an athlete, owns the Stay Ready Boxing and Fitness Gym in Fall River, Massachusetts. And like Demetrius Williams and Brandon Higgins, who I referenced earlier, if you just look at his physique, he looks like the guy that doesn't leave the gym 24/7. So Harry Gigliotti, in his second pro fight, stepping up to take on Chris Jacobs, who is 0-1 as a professional boxer. But the interesting thing about these guys' records here is Harry Gigliotti 1-0.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Jacobs 0-1. He has a draw in his lone pro fight. Chris Jacobs, if we're being honest here, fought the more stern opposition in his pro debut than Harry. Is Harry's 1-0 mean anything compared to Chris Jacobs' 0-1 when they both fought different levels of opposition? We'll find out on May 31st at the Castleton in Windham. It's going to be a great fight between Harry Gigliotti and Chris Jacobs, and I can't wait. That's going to be one of the final fights of the evening, and I already sense a great buzz between both the fighters' fans on Facebook and social media that they're really anticipating this one.
Sure. That should be great. Yeah, both hungry fighters, obviously, when you're just getting into it. I love the intensity you get from a young fighter like that. And I'm guessing this is the highlight of the evening in Linfield's Dominic Mizzioni, who takes on Vermont's Andre Belcaris.
So another fun name to say. I completely forgot about Dominic Manzioni. We got Ryan DiBartolomeo, Harry Gigliotti, and Dominic Manzioni. Those are three names that you're going to be saying all day because they're so fun to say. And I'm sure that those fighters want people to be saying their names following May 31st, following what they hope to be memorable performances. Dominic Manzioni taking on Andre Belcaris. This is an interesting one. Dominic Manzioni will soon be graduating from Merrimack College. He's in his early 20s and had two professional fights as a teenager over 2 years ago where he went 2-0, 2 knockouts. Has not fought in 2 years and is looking to get back into the sport. Now that he's graduating from college, he wants to make professional boxing a part of his professional life, just as he wants to make, I believe, a new job that he'll have as a financial advisor following his graduation from Merrimack College, part of his professional life. He'll be taking on Andre Belcaris. So Andre Belcaris is originally a mixed martial arts fighter from Vermont. He's a guy that made his pro boxing debut on less than 48 hours' notice last year at Foxwoods Casino and gave absolute hell to a fighter from Rhode Island named Nicky DeQuattro. That was the fight of the night and had people standing on their feet when he lost a close, unanimous decision. I'm very excited for this one because Andre Belcaris does not know how to take a backward step. He doesn't know anything but trying to throw punches from outer space that try to take his opponent's head off. And Dominic Manzioni hasn't fought in 2 years. Is there some ring rust? What's going to be like in front of the crowd once again? I can't wait to see this one. And Dominic Manzioni's trainer is a guy named Joe Lake, who was well known for having trained Dana Rosenblatt in the 90s, who was a fairly accomplished local fighter. He also briefly trained Mickey Ward on his comeback trail. But I think one of the more interesting things about Joe Lake that a lot of people don't realize is that he was the trainer of a guy who had some amateur boxing matches, but was also the Massachusetts Taekwondo champion in the early 90s. Do you know who the Massachusetts Taekwondo champion of the early 90s was that Joe Lake trained?
I couldn't tell you. In the early 90s, I was about 5. So
so was I. But this guy was a guy named Joe Rogan, who is now a stand-up comedian. He's a commentator for UFC.
Awesome.
And was the host of Fear Factor and hosts probably the biggest podcast in the world. So Joe Lake, the trainer, has an interesting background. He's passing a lot of good information to his fighter, Dominic Manzioni, who's very young in his early 20s, 2-0, 2 knockouts. And we're going to see how all that knowledge fares out in the ring against Andre Belcaris on May 31st. Awesome. Dominic Manzioni, Ryan DiBartolomeo, Harry Gigliotti. Fun names to say. With all due respect to Chris Jacobs, he's got two very normal names. It's not as fun to say as DiBartolomeo.
No, and all those names. Honestly, I might have to check out Fratello's downstairs after saying them. I'm looking for an Italian dish, but
I think Manzioni is probably Italian. Di Bartolomeo certainly is, and I guess Gigliotti would be as well.
You would think so, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, they all end in. Yeah, you're right.
Sounds like a really exciting event. It's great for Southern New Hampshire to continue to delve into the boxing scene. As you said, 5 events in the past year and a half, which is awesome for the area. I'm a big boxing fan. Going back to when I was younger, you could hear some of the Mike Tyson sound that I had in the mix up there. Before I get you out of here, a couple more questions just on boxing in general. We had
Sure.
the Canelo Jacobs fight last night, kind of a contentious decision, a close decision going to Canelo, who unifies the trio of middleweight world titles in Las Vegas last evening. Did you agree with the decision? It seems like Canelo seems to get the benefit of the doubt when on these close ones. CBS had it as a 114 draw.
Yeah, I thought the scoring was dead on accurate last night. It was a unanimous decision win for Canelo Alvarez, who won by scores of 116 to 112 on one scorecard and 115 to 113 on the other 2 scorecards, which means 2 judges had him winning 7 rounds to 5 and 1 judge had him winning 8 rounds to 4. I had him winning 8 rounds to 4. I thought that Daniel Jacobs was a viable challenger, a viable contender, and a guy who put up a very respectable fight, but there was no question in my mind that Canelo Alvarez won the fight at the end of that bout. So with all due respect to CBS Sports, who had the fight a draw, I thought that Canelo Alvarez clearly won the fight last night, though it was very competitive, and Daniel Jacobs, I'm sure, will be a viable middleweight for many years to come.
Certainly. Yeah.
Is there more contention besides CBS Sports? Because I actually left the broadcast last night thinking, you know what? I don't think anyone could dispute this decision, which I know was the case in Canelo's 2 most recent fights, or his 2 most recent mega fights against Triple G.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, I thought that Jacobs kind of landed the punch of the night in round 9. He kind of he
certainly landed the best punch of the night. I'll give you that for sure. But I think that round by round, I think Canelo won.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. Especially nowadays, you see fighters like Mayweather, it's a strategy game. So I certainly could see why Canelo took the fight last evening. One more for you, and we're going to move into the heavyweights just a little bit here. This is kind of an opinion-based question, but do you believe that Deontay Wilder is scared to fight Anthony Joshua?
Absolutely not. I think that Deontay Wilder is not afraid to fight Anthony Joshua, and I don't think Anthony Joshua is afraid to Deontay Wilder. I do think that there are managers and promoters surrounding at least one, if not both, of the fighters who are looking to protect their investment and not risk a loss for their guy against the other guy unless there's massive quantities of money on the table. But I absolutely do not think Deontay Wilder is afraid to fight Anthony Joshua. As a matter of fact, I think Deontay Wilder wants to fight more than Anthony Joshua at this point. I think that Deontay Wilder wants to prove himself. Right. I'm not saying Deontay Wilder would affirmatively win that fight if it were to take place, but I would think that if there's any way to gauge which fighter wants it more, I think Deontay Wilder wants to fight Anthony Joshua more than vice versa.
Sure. Yeah, I love Wilder's attitude. The way he talks in between fights. He has that swagger that is missing sometimes in modern boxing. You look back to the Muhammad Ali's and the Mike Tysons of the world, and the attitude. I love the way that Wilder conducts himself outside of the ring and obviously inside of the ring. Both of those guys can throw haymakers. They're certainly knockout kings, and I'd love to see that fight. I'm sure there's a lot of hype and money behind something like that, but to me, there's
a lot of boxing politics behind it as well. I don't want to delve too deep into it because I don't want to confuse your listeners, but Deontay Wilder is under the umbrella of an organization called Premier Boxing Champions, which primarily has 2 television outlets for their product, which is Fox TV and Showtime. Anthony Joshua is signed to a company called Matchroom Boxing in the United Kingdom, and their primarily distribution outlet is a network called DAZN, which is a streaming app that had the Canelo fight last night against Daniel Jacobs. Outside of the 2 fighters wanting to fight each other, there are a lot of contractual and business things that must be ironed out, because I'm sure that DAZN has spent a lot of money on Anthony Joshua, and they're going to want the exclusive rights to broadcast an Anthony Joshua-Deontay Wilder fight. Concurrently, Deontay Wilder with Premier Boxing Champions, they have a contractual deal with Fox Television and Showtime. They're going to want to broadcast the Deontay Wilder fight. Somehow, some way, they'll make it work. Whenever there's great demand, they always do. The two best examples I can think of this happening is when Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather finally fought in a joint pay-per-view broadcast between Showtime and HBO. And the same thing happened with Mike Tyson and Lennox Lewis in the early 2000s. But there's just a lot of cooks in that kitchen that all have to get on board and make the right recipe for that fight to happen. And I think in time it will happen. I hope it happens. It'll be great for the sport. And you and I both want to see it, don't we?
Absolutely. I think that was the fight that I was most looking forward to, hopefully happening this year. You know, as you said, these guys aren't really getting any younger. It does remind me a lot of the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight that ended up happening, in my mind, later than it should have. I really wanted to see those two fight in their prime. I think Pacquiao would have had a better opportunity if that were the case. Although, I can't dispute Mayweather and his dominance of the sport. 50-0, 51-0. He's as good as there's ever been. But I really would have liked to see them in their prime. So I'm hoping they can get the Wilder Joshua fight off the ground sooner than later.
I'm hoping it happens as well. And to your point a few minutes ago that you enjoy the bravado and the swagger of Deontay Wilder, how great is it to have an American heavyweight champion like Deontay Wilder following the better part of the last 20 years, the heavyweight division being ruled by Eastern Europeans? I mean, the 90s, you had Mike Tyson, you had Evander Holyfield, you had Riddick Bowe, you had all these really fun, entertaining to watch American heavyweight champions. You had the second coming of George Foreman in that time period as well. And then the last 15, 20 years, it's been primarily dominated by Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko, and the other guys who have been in the mix are guys like Ruslan Shagayev and Sultan Ibragimov. What do these guys all have in common? They're all from former Soviet companies in Eastern Europe, and there's been nothing to really excite the American boxing fans until Deontay Wilder, who is very exciting to watch, knocking guys out, entertaining as he does it. And I'm a fan of Deontay Wilder, and I hope that he fights Anthony Joshua. Now, let me ask you this, Jayson, because in your question, you did say that it was an opinion-based question, and you asked if Deontay Wilder was afraid to fight Anthony Joshua. Is that a vibe that you'd been getting?
I do think that, I don't think he personally is. I think that he has the confidence and the swagger. And just a quick reminder to those of you listening, this is Crosby Sports Talk. I have Boston Boxing Promotions President Peter Czymbor on the line. But no, I don't think that he personally is afraid, but it does worry me that it's gone this long. I've heard of Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder for years at this point. I've been waiting for this fight to eventually happen. I do worry that in some ways Wilder is afraid that he could possibly lose to Joshua. I do think that's a possibility because to me, when I watch Joshua fight, I think that he has a really good chance to beat Deontay Wilder, and I don't think Deontay Wilder wants to lose at this point in his career with the record that he's established. So I don't
think
those
either
concerns.
Guy wants to lose at this point in their career, particularly with the record they've established. But I was curious as why you thought it was the Deontay Wilder avoiding Anthony Joshua and not vice versa, if either of them was. Because I didn't get the sense that either fighter was ducking the other, but I do get the sense that Deontay Wilder wants it more than Anthony Joshua.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that insight. From 10,000 feet, I guess it's just a personal opinion. Like I said, I think that Joshua feels slighted by the fact that he hasn't had a chance at a championship belt the way that Deontay Wilder has. I feel like he's an also ran in some of these discussions, maybe because he's not American, but I had that feeling, and I appreciate you clearing that up a little bit. But yeah, I like Joshua a lot. I think he would have a great opportunity to beat Wilder if and when that fight actually happens.
And you know what else is incredible about that fight, if and when it does happen? The amount of places that will vie to host the fight would be incredible. You could do it in New York, either at Madison Square Garden or the Barclays Center. Those are surefire sellouts. Certainly, the big arenas in Las Vegas will want it. But I think a wild card here is Wembley Stadium in London, which has hosted some Anthony Joshua fights and had 80,000 people attend. I think this might be one of those fights that you bring into a stadium.
That would be great. You could play some Queen. It would be awesome. But
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for joining the program, Peter. Hopefully we can get you back on here. Hopefully we can get some of the fighters on in the near future to pump up this event. If people want more information on the event, they can go to boxingnewhampshire.com, boxingnh.com. We've got the big event coming up May 31st at the Castleton Banquet and Conference Center in Windham, New Hampshire. Did you have any closing thoughts on the event, Peter?
No, I just want to thank you so much for having me on the program this morning. And like you said, check out boxingnh.com where tickets are available for our next professional boxing event, May 31st at the Castleton in Windham, New Hampshire. It is a small, intimate venue. There's not a bad seat in the house. The fights are good. The drinks are cold. And you're going to have a good time. So come on out Friday, May 31st. And I look forward to chatting with you again, Jayson. And we'll certainly have some of our fighters on the show in the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, Peter. Have a lovely Sunday.
Hey, you too, my friend. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later. Bye. All right, that was Peter Czymbor, the president of Boston Boxing Promotions, pumping up an upcoming event this month, May 31st, at the Castleton Banquet Conference Center in Windham, New Hampshire.